Hello, this is Mr. B again, and this lecture will talk about flowcharts. Flowcharts are a tool that will help us to go from a problem, an idea, something that we would like to write a program for. It'll help us go from that to the actual computer language. Um, Now, as you get better at programming and more experienced, you may not need to actually plan out your program very much. You'll be pretty much plan it out on the fly as you're actually writing the source code for it. But until you get to that point, or when you have to program a much more complicated application, like say for example a chess game or something that you can't just come up with overnight, um, then you can use a flowchart. What flowcharts are is they're block diagrams of your of what you want the computer to do um, in your application. So for example, and I mean an easy example would be a recipe. A, when a writer writes a recipe book, when a cook writes a recipe book, they're basically writing a program that you will execute in order to recreate whatever culinary creation they came up with. And so they give you all of the ingredients. In programming terms, that would be all of your variables and your input data. They give you, and then they give you step-by-step directions on how to mix everything together, how long to cook it, how to present it, and so on. And we can do something like that as a flowchart. So let's use that as our example. Say making a sandwich, okay? And most of the every item in a flowchart is going to be a block. They won't all have the same shape, but most of them are going to be rectangular. And you always have a start block, kind of as like in a race. And usually go top to bottom, left to right. Okay, and when you to indicate which direction you are going from one block to the next, you use an arrow. So from the start, we're going to go down, and we're gonna. This will be a very simple, very high level flowchart. Okay, and we're gonna say. Put bread on plate. Place meat. Place cheese. Add condiments. That's your ketchup, mustard, etc. Finish. Okay? So here you have a simple flowchart for how to make a sandwich. Now, as you're creating your flowchart for your program, you usually want to start out fairly simple, a fairly simple flowchart, maybe 3 or 4 blocks or so, and don't worry about the details. Just make sure you have as many steps as you can think of, as many big steps as you can think of in there. One of the beauties of flowcharts is you can use them to divide and conquer your problem. So, for example, I wrote this first fairly high level flowchart, and let's face it, making a sandwich is not that complicated. But maybe some of these steps are actually more complicated than others. Maybe some of them are less detailed at this point than others are. Okay? But we can think about this first, right? If you start, so this is like a good first attempt, and now we can start thinking about the details. Okay, we said here put bread on plate. You know, we usually mean the actual slices, but what kind of bread? Wheat, rye, white, some crazy granola bread or something, or do you want to go for a roll? So there's more details in here depending on how much flexibility you want to give the user. Place meat. Okay, that's the kind of meat you want to have. Well, is it ham? Is it turkey? Is it pastrami? Is it a combination? Is it thin sliced, thick sliced, shaved? Do you want bacon with that? All kinds of options, right? If you've ever worked at a restaurant or a fast food place, you know, the classic, do you want fries with that? That kind of a thing. Cheese, again, same issues. There's lots of choices. Condiments, again, lots of choices. So now we can get to the point where we can break this down. We can break down each of these individual pieces and we can break them down into their own flowcharts. Okay? So instead of drawing this whole flowchart all over again, you can just use a new sheet of paper or flip the paper over, and let's work on adding some more details in one of these. So for example, let's pick add condiments, okay? Because there's a wide variety to choose from, and maybe we'll just already decide what kinds of condiments we're going to add just for the sake of this, okay? So I'm going to start a new flowchart, and I'm going to actually call this add condiments. Okay? And as with any flowchart, you're going to have a start. Okay. Now, this isn't the same start as this one. This is the start of your make a sandwich. Right? This flowchart is going to be talking about adding condiments, so some detail there. And we'll just say add lettuce, tomato, alfalfa sprouts, now personally, my son and I, we like to add ketchup and of course mustard. I will leave it at that for now because I ran out of space. Finish. Okay. Ever notice how my writing is leaning downhill? I'm going to try to avoid doing that. This is great. Recording these lectures is great. It's like I'm talking to myself. It's wonderful. So now, potentially, we could then create separate flowcharts for each of these. Okay? I'm going to stop this lecture here. And in the next one, we're going to deal with decision making. So making our flowcharts a little bit more complicated to deal with more complicated problems.